I remember the whole process of dying. I remember lying in bed and having my friends and family around. And again, feeling familiar, even though I didn't want to die and I was like clinging to life, also feeling that this process was very familiar, going through my life review. And this is the one that really hits me. When they took me through that life review, they showed me what I could have done, my potential. Had I lived the assignment on my soul, had I done what they told me to do all along, this is what would have happened. You would have helped people exponentially. Your life would have been more impactful for others. And so I said, okay, send me back. I'll do it. I understand now. I'm sorry. I'll do it. Send me back in. And they said, you can't. You're dead. It's too late. And you'll never be that person again.
I'd like to welcome to the show, Mariko Frederick. How you doing, Mariko?
I'm well. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very good. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And
Thanks for
I'm looking forward to listening to your interesting journey so far in life. As they say, you've done a few things that we haven't, most people haven't. So my first question to you is, what was your life like before you had your near-death experience?
It was good. I would say that I had arrived. I was 29 when it happened. So before that, I had a full-time, pretty successful practice in Chinese medicine. I was an avid rock climber. I was fit. I had a friend group. I was like, everything was good. I was newly married. And everything was really good. I feel like I had reached like the pinnacle of what we were supposed to have in life. And then I died.
So there was nothing. So you weren't off track, or maybe we'll discover later that you were off track. I don't know yet. Normally, near-death experiences happen that like, oh, you're off track. We got to kind of remind you of what you have to do, or oh, there's a shift here or there. But let me ask you, before we get to your near-death experience, were you religious growing up? Did you follow religion
Not
or
really. So my
spiritual?
mom's from Japan. So I
Okay.
think her family was Shinto. And then I've been
Mhm.
to a lot of Buddhist funerals and things like that growing up. And then my dad grew up Catholic and then Christian, but both of them had some experiences in the church that weren't really positive. And so we didn't grow up with religion.
So you didn't have any preconceived religious, beliefs, strong religious beliefs before you went through the
Not
near-death
strong. I think
experience.
I got to go to Sunday school a little bit, but I kind of joke that I wonder if that was just like babysitting for them. Because I
Fair
don't think
enough.
they were going to church.
So life is going along great. You've reached the pinnacle of what you think you're supposed to reach at 29, and then you die. So
And then I
how did that happen?
So I kind of, the story, I don't want to it triggers people, but what happened was I went to somebody practicing alternative medicine who should have been licensed and was practicing basically as like a licensed alternative doctor. And later I found out that she was not licensed, had never been to school, and was ordering it through somebody else's doctorate license, her equipment she was using on me. So she injured me to the point of having a near-death experience. I found out later the fifth person she had injured. One person was in intensive care. She had already gone up against the attorney general of that state. And that is basically what happened. So, but yes, I guess it was a wake-up call because I was on track and then there was a missing piece. So that's
So
how it happened.
so did you so when you I mean did you die on the table? Were you at the
There,
hospital? Like, yeah, how did that
oh,
like where did it
right.
go?
Yeah, so I kind of wish because I think it would have made more sense to me. I actually didn't. I got sicker and sicker and sicker, but it wasn't something that I could pinpoint and say, "Oh, this is happening." I just felt off. I felt very off, very weird, and it was actually like the next day that I had the near-death experience, and I was just like, "Something's wrong." I don't know if you've ever had anything go wrong in your body. I
Yeah.
mean, anything from like I've had my appendix out, right? And you just know something's wrong inside of me, and it was like that, but since I've had both experiences of appendectomy and that, it was like times 1,000. Like something's very wrong, but I couldn't put my finger. I wasn't like nothing hurt in one place, right? And I had worked in a neurotrauma intensive care, so I'm kind of like nurses and doctors. We make the worst patients in a way because we're like assessing, and I'm like, no, 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 I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And so I went to lie down, and that's when it happened. It was like all of the life force just drained out of my body, and that's when I had the experience. So it wasn't in her office, it was actually a little later.
So did you pop out of your body? What was when
Yeah.
you died, what happened?
So I was lying there feeling this like crushing weight on my chest. It felt like iron, like an iron weight was on my chest, and I felt like breathing was so hard, right? I was pushing this weight up and letting it fall and pushing it back up and letting it fall. And eventually I just thought, I think I'll let it fall. And when I did that is when I died. And in the same moment, I recognized that I wasn't going to die because there was no death. But I remember feeling before that moment, my blood felt like it was made of lead. Everything was so heavy and breathing was so difficult. And I just thought, breathing's really hard. Like, why am I doing this? Because it was like all of a sudden this epiphany that I don't have to do this. I don't have to do this. And it didn't feel again like I was dying. It didn't feel like the scary or sad thing. And so I did take my last breath. And that's when I was feeling the life force drain out of my body, like you would drain a pool. And then I saw this, it was like it was almost always there, but this light, like 1,000 suns shining at my forehead. And it was so familiar and so warm, like it had always been there. And I just remember feeling like, wow, breathing's really overrated. It's funny, we think we have to do it. And I just felt like, oh, wow, this is so much better, right? And still having this idea that I guess I'm dying, but I'm also not.
Mm-hmm.
So it was so familiar. This process felt very familiar to me. And so after that, I guess I was floating above my body because I remember watching my husband in the kitchen. He was actually brewing like a medicinal tea because we knew I didn't feel well. We weren't sure what, so I'd asked him for something Chinese medicine wise, like put those herbs together, maybe I'll feel better. I'm like, I didn't believe I was dying. I just thought I didn't feel well. I didn't know what was happening. So I watched him and I remember saying goodbye and feeling so much love for him and just knowing that he would be okay and he would remarry and everything would be okay. And it might not be the same as what we have, but he would be okay. And then from there, I sort of went into more of the, I guess, near-death experience where I said goodbye to my family. And then it's funny, I'll use terms that don't make sense because but I'll say I stepped behind the veil. Even though I wasn't stepping because I wasn't in my body anymore. And so beyond the veil was where everything started to unfold and take place. And that's where I had like my life review. And
so let's go step by step. I want details. This sounds very exciting. I know it's old hat to you, but a lot of people have not heard this. So when you step beyond the veil, what's the first thing you see?
I didn't see because you don't see with your human eyes anymore. So it's feeling for me, and I'm super empathic and all that. But for me, it was feeling. And then I guess I did start to see my life review, and I got to see everything that was important, right? All the moments of decision and interaction that matter. Not every time I tied my shoes or brushed my teeth, but like these moments of interaction. So the first one that I really remember, because it's sort of like everything was good, lots of love. You're a toddler, you're a baby, everything's fine. And then I was like 4 or 5 years old and I was mean to somebody on purpose for the first time. And that's where my life review really started. I was using my energy, my power, I was in kindergarten, so I was 4 or 5 years old, even at that age, but I was doing it intentionally to hurt somebody. And I was teasing her about something and I made her cry. And in that life review, there were several moments, but in that first one was so pivotal for me because I realized just because you're little doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing, right? Just because I was little didn't mean I wasn't accountable for my actions in this moment. And so I got to experience that moment from my point of view, being mean to this little girl. And from her point of view, like I was inside her body feeling what she was feeling. And I was just being mean and teasing her about something. It had to do with like dog prints in the cement. It was really silly. And she thought it was funny. And I told her that the dog had died. And how would you like it if you died and people laughed at you? And I was just being really mean. And I was feeling from her standpoint, I could hear in her head, why is she doing this? Why is she being so mean to me? She didn't understand. And she started to well up and cry. And at the same time, I could feel it from that God consciousness of zero judgment, just love and holding space and watching from zero judgment. So I felt all three simultaneously. And then I stopped being mean to her because I made her cry and I didn't want to get in trouble. So that was my first big life. That was my first experience in the life review. It didn't matter how little I was. I was doing this on purpose, and we are not to ever intentionally hurt somebody. And so I learned really never to be that way. And by the way, she doesn't remember that moment, and she's forgiven me, and all is well.
Good. So as before we keep going, you're in this, are you in a room or is it just screens in front of you? How does that work?
No, it was like a void. Everything was black, but not without light. So the way I describe it is like a single ray of light would have been a foreign object. It was just this void of love, bliss, joy, peace, ever expanding. And there was a being there whose job it was to help me through this process of my life review. So
Okay.
I went through the life review and I saw, again, all the pivotal moments of the way I describe it is when I was soul aligned versus when I was ego aligned, right? Because it's not really bad or good. It's just, are you coming home or are you going away from home within yourself, within your soul? And so, seeing a lot and just feeling gratitude, I guess. And the only way I could put it is like gratitude from the universe, gratitude from God when I was doing a good job, but so much gratitude that it would explode me if I could feel it in this human body.
Mhm.
And also my own deep regret and disappointment when I did something ego based. It wasn't from the universe. The universe was impartial, it was non-judgmental, except when I was doing something good and there was just like tremendous love. And maybe it was my love for my own soul, right? Because there is nobody else, right? We're all one. But I was experiencing duality still. So feeling that love and then also feeling that deep regret when I was out of alignment.
But it doesn't seem like there was judgment. It's
No,
just no judge. There's nobody there, like a courtroom. They're like, okay, defend your life. Look what you did at 5 years old. What's wrong with you? None of that,
exactly.
nothing like
No.
that.
No, it was like watching two toddlers. Like if you're, I think you have kids. Do you have
Mhm.
your parent? So like
Yeah.
watching your little, if they were little, when they were little, watching them like make a mistake. My daughter the other day was like pouring a glass of something and she just kept pouring and it was like overflowing. Like it's
Been
kind
there,
of like
been
that.
there.
We've all been there, right? So I'm
Yeah.
just watching it happen, like, oh, here we go. Well, this is how she's going to learn. It was that kind of judgment, right? It was like very sweet.
Yeah.
It's funny to say parental because I don't feel like God is our parent in that way because in the highest consciousness, we're all one. But I will say in my life review, it felt very much like this benevolent being watching over me kind of with a smirk, like, yeah, I know, but there was just so much love. There could never be, there was no duality to love. So there couldn't be judgment because there was no opposite.
So then during your life review, was there, I've heard before in some other near-death experiences of parallel lives. So in other words, you're like, oh, I wonder what would happen if I would have married Joey instead. And you kind of see how that plays out. Did you get anything like that?
I didn't. I just saw the life I was in. I think the whole purpose of my near death was just to remind me to get to work. So
Okay.
I didn't see that. I did see, I got downloaded with what I didn't know what it was. You have this huge experience. And so after that life review of seeing everything, and I was only 29, so I hadn't lived that long. And a lot of it was just mistakes I made. The biggest mistake, honestly, was the intentional one when I was little. That was the biggest thing I came back with, because I think we can excuse ourselves. And I realized, no, we can't. No, you're not in trouble, but don't do that. So after that, they actually, I guess, cleared me of something. I remember seeing this silhouette dropping through a big round light. And I remember asking this guide, what is that? And they said, it's the part of you that gets attached. And we just like in the silence watched it move through this tunnel of light. And then we moved on to the next phase, which was meeting these four beings, but I can't tell you what they looked like because they weren't in form. So it was like these beings of just infinite love, but I could tell there was four of them. And they just showered me with this intense, unconditional divine love. Again, it would have exploded a human body. We couldn't accept that much in our incarnate. And I felt so connected to them. And then it was almost like we were having a meeting. But again, I'm not in a physical form. They're not in a physical form. So I can't tell you what it looks like. But I could feel that we were connected. And it was this very sacred moment where I could tell they were connecting to me and giving me some information that I would use later. And so we just sat in the quiet, not, we didn't sit, but we were there in the quiet, the stillness. And then when that was complete, I was like, okay, that's whatever that is, I'll use it at a later date. I didn't know what it was. And I remember just, again, it's so funny, these human limitations, the words we have. I'll say standing. I'm not standing anywhere because I'm not in a body, but it felt like I was standing and watching out throughout the universe. And I just had this full realization of who I am, that I was never Mariko. I was never a rock climber. I was never anything I thought I was, and that I was finally me. And I am love, I am joy, I am bliss, I am peace. This is who I am. And everything I was just kind of melted away. And I realized and felt that we are all one. So I could never be Mariko because we're one. So I'm having this awakening realization and just feeling the bliss of the universe for, people have asked me how long, and it was like, I don't know, 800 years. It felt like I had a whole lifetime, just lifetime here is just a blip, right? So it just felt like that's where I was, experiencing infinite time as my true reality, my true identity as the infinite soul. And that's when I heard the voice say, it's not your time. You have to go back. To which I responded, no. Because go back and be who? Right? I'd been here so long. I was like, what? And then they said, you have to go back. You have to go back and help people. It's not your time. And the way I communicated was what I call through a thought wave. So it was like a wave of everything I'm trying to communicate, but in a thought, but it wasn't through words. It wasn't verbal. And I communicated that back. No. And then again, they communicated to me, it's not my time. I have to go back and help people. And they explained that everybody has a time, and you can't go before and you can't go after. And this is not your time. You have to go back and help people. And I understood at that moment, okay, I'll do it. I've got something big. I've got something more to do, whatever that is. And I remember I was like trying to get back in my body, and I didn't know how, because how do you do that? So I was like, okay, and nothing happened. And so I told them I can't get back in my body, to which they then, I felt like I was being hurled through space. And then I was in my body, I took a breath, and there was just raking pain. And I thought, I've got to get to the hospital. And as soon as I had that thought, it was almost like I was back again with them just a little bit. And they said, don't use Western medicine. And they let me know that if I did, it would interrupt whatever had taken place, whatever light codes I'd gotten, whatever was happening. I realized that was not the path, which was hard because I had worked in a trauma intensive care. And so, my logical mind is like, you need to go to the hospital. And so they sort of let me know, but on such a deep level that I really understood it. And then I came back.
And when you came back, with all this information that you just told me, did you remember it all at the time that you came back? After you started getting better, you remembered everything, correct?
All of it, yeah.
Did you think you were like a dream, or did you really have a clear understanding of what had happened?
Both. I knew it was real, and at the same time I wanted it not to be. It was hard. It wasn't fun. There was no podcast back then. There was no people talking about near-death experiences back then. I felt it was like I lost my identity, and now I have to come back and be Mariko, and I don't know who that really is. And I've got this whole other piece that I brought back with me. I don't know what to do with it. I'm 29.
Right.
I don't know. So it was like simultaneously both. I sort of did have my self-doubts of like, maybe I was dreaming it. Maybe I made it up. Maybe. And like, I knew, no, you can't make that up. But
yeah, I mean, and 29, you barely figuring things out yourself.
I know. We think we have it figured out, but
oh no, of course. Yeah, we think we have it all figured out at 29.
Yeah. Yeah. Even as an old soul, like we think we do, but we just, the more years we get to be here, the more experience we have.
What year was this, if you don't mind me asking?
I guess it was 2023, or sorry, 2000 and, so I've had some brain damage. I'm sorry.
Sure.
It was 20 years ago.
20 years ago. So it would have been 2003, 2004.
Actually, I think it was 2003 because it was, I think it was late fall. It was fall.
Got it.
So I had
So
also
yeah,
had some other issues leading up to that. So I've had my share of mini strokes and absence seizures too. So I don't always remember everything.
so 20 years ago, yeah, you're absolutely right. There were no podcasts yet, or if there was, it was Joe Rogan in his office somewhere, and is recording something. So yeah, podcasts weren't really a thing back then. Near-death experiences were talked about, but not nearly as openly as it is now, and not nearly as many as there
No,
is now with that. So you really didn't have a support system when you came back to deal
no.
with this, kind of like because psychologically this had to have screwed with you in
Oh,
a big
yeah.
way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like a gaining and a loss of identity all at the same time. But the gaining of identity as this light being, like, what do you do with that 20 years ago? Right? Even
Right.
having been in alternative medicine and having this sort of woo-woo practice at the time, I still didn't know what to do with this amount and what I knew I was meant to do. So my support system was my husband, who was there when it happened. And, he's just been my constant. But did I have an outlet to express this and to digest it? No. I knew they happened though. I knew because working in the intensive care, you hear a lot of stories when your patients come back and they tell you what happened. So I knew it was a thing, but in my mind, I was like, doesn't that happen in the hospitals? Like, can that even happen at home? It's just, I think your mind is trying to get out of it. Or my mind
Yeah,
was.
because your mind's trying to process something that it's unprocessable, if you will.
Exactly.
It's something that can't be really processed because it's so beyond the hardware that we have. I mean,
Yeah,
this whole experience is so beyond the hardware that we have.
yeah,
Infinite knowledge, downloads, no time, infinite love, no duality. Goes against everything that our hardware, our brains are built to understand. So as you're coming out of this, did you you have your husband, so your husband at least is there to support you, and you talk to somebody about this, which is great because a lot of near death experiencers can't talk to anybody about this because they think they're nuts. At what point did you come out publicly out of the closet, out of the near death experience closet, and start telling family, friends, colleagues, things like that?
well, I did tell some family and friends at the time, but we had just moved to a new state, so I didn't really have a community there. But I did tell some friends and family over the phone because I was explaining why I was so sick. Because I was sick for 10 years. It wasn't like I just got all better the next day. I lost a chunk of my life. I gained a lot back, but I lost like my 30s were just, sick and going through a lot, and I didn't know what was going on. Um, and interesting enough, when I did go see a Western doctor, so I didn't go to the hospital, but I did go see a Western doctor weeks later to see if there was any permanent damage because some big things were happening. And I was like, well, I don't know, great, I'm not going to die because they won't let me, but what's happening to my physical body? And when I found this doctor, he had had a near-death experience 8 years prior and understood the assignment of do not use Western medicine. So we did get to have a talk, which was really nice to feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. This does happen. And then it took, sorry, what was your question?
The when you came out of the near death experience closet.
Um, I think I did my first podcast and shared it publicly maybe 4 or 5 years, like 5 years ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm. And then how did you deal with people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues? I mean, I'm assuming not everybody was open to this, or maybe they were. How was it?
I don't know. I don't really talk about it with my family. It's like they know. My parents have passed on now, so
Mm-hmm.
so now they know everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really talk about it a lot with my family. I had one family member later that I could talk to about this kind of thing. But it wasn't like a big conversation. I think in the beginning, people wanted to know, like after it happened, and people maybe that I didn't even know that well wanted to know about it. And they would send me email links to like other people's stories. I think we had blogs back then. And so it was like people wanted me to read other stories and I couldn't do it. It was like whatever happened was so sacred. I couldn't I couldn't take in more information of somebody else's experience. I couldn't do it. I felt very fragile. I was very sick. So it took a long time to be able to talk about it publicly. And then when I did, I wasn't prepared for some of the trolls online. And that was really hard, of whether or not somebody believes you or whatever. And it so it's been a difficult journey. You know, it took a long time for me to share this publicly.
Now, did you come, from my understanding, you came back with some abilities that you didn't have before the near-death experience. Is that true?
Yeah, I think one is just like that awareness and the connection, right? Which I did have. I think that the near death experience, you know, remember who you are and go back and help people. I think that means something different for a lot of people. And for me, I knew exactly what they were talking about, but I was resistant. I didn't want to because I wanted to be normal. I mean, I really wanted to be normal. My whole life, I've never been normal. I've always had weird things happening to me that I thought were normal, and then I found out they weren't. So for me, I didn't want one more thing that put me outside the box of normal. Um, so it was hard to feel grounded in who I was now and some of the abilities I had. My intuition was just, you know, magnified.
No, but you work with past lives and kind of life between lives as well. You're able to do you remember yours and other people's as well, correct?
Do, yeah. So that was the big message when I came back and they said, remember who you are. I was like, oh, really? I have to do that? So I stayed conscious between lifetimes, and I thought everyone did. I thought it was totally normal. I didn't know until I was about 19 years old when someone told me that people don't remember in between lifetimes. So for me, remember who you are, go back and help people was them calling me to start sharing my story of what happens to us in between lifetimes. Because I thought, I didn't know. I didn't know that people didn't remember that. Or not remember like they forgot, but I didn't know that everyone didn't experience one long lifetime.
So what happens between lifetimes? Since I don't remember. I don't remember. I'd love to know.
It's funny because in some ways people say I don't remember, but every time I tell my story, it's like you do remember. There's a remembrance
Okay.
inside of you. So when in my last life, I died, and I died probably around the age I am now. I think I was in my 40s. I had a young daughter. I was a male. My wife had died, and it was hundreds of years ago. Even though I mean, it could have been 1,000 years ago, and I was living in a very two-story brick building. And I remember coming upstairs into my home and processing what I just learned, which was that I was going to die. And I was wearing brown pants and a linen shirt, standing at my window, watching the guy push the cart with vegetables on it. And like he was selling vegetables, and he was going home for the day. And I remember he had 3 daughters, and I knew where he lived. And I was feeling a lot of I was having a little pity party. And I was feeling like, okay, this guy sells vegetables and I'm going to die. And I was like, I don't know. I was some sort of official. I was some sort of mayor or something of the town. And I remember the last project I worked on was like getting the windmill back up. And if somebody's house burned down, I'd make sure that everything went okay and they got what they needed. And I had this role in this town I was in. And I was processing that I was going to die soon. And I remember the whole process of dying. I remember lying in bed and having my friends and family around. And again, feeling familiar, even though I didn't want to die and I was like clinging to life, also feeling that this process was very familiar, going through my life review. And this is the one that really hits me. When they took me through that life review, they showed me what I could have done, my potential. Had I lived the assignment on my soul, had I done what they told me to do all along, this is what would have happened. You would have helped people exponentially. Your life would have been more impactful for others. And so I said, okay, send me back. I'll do it. I understand now. I'm sorry. I'll do it. Send me back in. And they said, you can't. You're dead. It's too late. And you'll never be that person again. So I live with that every day, that deep regret of wanting to live the assignment on my soul. And at the same time, feeling like, you know, a little nervous about it. And I was like that my whole life. So I went from there, and actually I didn't go right into the higher realms because I had this young daughter and I felt like I didn't want to leave her. And so I sort of stayed in this in between, watching her, almost like I was watching a movie. And she was crying and she was in bed all the time. And it wasn't until she started living her life and started to like feel happy again that I realized I need to go on with my life. She's living her life and it's time for me to go live mine. And at that point, I went into the higher realm. I went into the astral realm, which is a world made of light. And you come into a light body. And it's where, you know, you're using your chakras and you're telepathic. I think a lot of people would feel that this is heaven. I remember when I first got there, I couldn't move or see anything. It was just like everything around me was white. And then I realized, oh, I have to open my spiritual eye. Not that I had that thought, but it was like, oh, right, I know how to do this. And then as I opened it, I remember the world around me just came alive on this. It was like a planet. It's a higher realm, but it was a planet. And I remember just looking at my body and feeling like, oh, right, this is who I am. And I felt a lot taller and very young and just healthy, so healthy. Like being sick was like impossible. And feeling just this radiant love and peace. And I remember looking down and just seeing the grass underneath my feet. I had bare feet, and just looking down and seeing this emerald green grass shooting up all around me, and recognizing that this world, like we only see half the rainbow on Earth, and there's a whole different category of color there. And again, it's so familiar when you're experiencing it. You're like, oh, right, I knew that, right? And just experiencing water moving through this river, but it was made of light, and everything there is made of light. And I had this entire lifetime there where at first a lot of people, when they go into death, they go into a death sleep. They sleep for a little while. Sometimes they sleep for the entire time until they come back. For me, I took a nap and I found this meadow, and I went into the meadow and I lied down and I took the most epic nap ever. But it was like a nap for probably days, weeks, months. I have no idea, because you don't need food in the same way. It's different, as you're just an energy body. And I remember my teacher coming to the meadow, almost like, are you up yet? Are you ready? And I was like, 5 more minutes. And days, weeks later, I don't know what it was, but it was like he would come back, and I could feel like he was male, even though there you could be male, female, whatever you want. You can change bodies. You can be a male body, you can be a female body. It really doesn't matter. It's not a big deal there. And eventually I was ready. And at that point, I remember there was some teachings happening with me. I played a role there where I just had this oval shaped meadow that I would hang out in all the time. And I remember seeing all these spiritual people over by the river in a circle having talks, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to go there, but I couldn't, because I hadn't reached the consciousness to be able to go communicate with them and have that relationship. So I worked on myself. I meditated. Sometimes people would come into my meadow and I would heal them. I had a role as a healer. Then eventually I could go and join that group of people, right, at the river and talk. And it's interesting because as I did that, some people would leave and we're like, why would you leave? This is like the most amazing spiritual community ever, right? And we're like talking and communicating, and then it happened to me. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm playing a role of a spiritual person. And we're not here to play any roles. We're here to release all of the roles that we think we are on Earth, in the astral realm. You don't want to have a role. So eventually I also left, went back to my meadow and meditated, and just continued working on myself, trying to connect with God consciousness on the deepest and highest level I could. And that's really what I spent a lot of my time doing while I was there.
Did you see any relatives or ancestors?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, when you first get there. So before I took a nap, when I first got there, first it was just this epiphany of, okay, wow, look at everything's made of light. And then, yeah, all of your relatives are there. And the neat thing is it's not just from this lifetime, it was also past lives. So I could see other beings, other souls that I was close to. So you could say like my family, but it wasn't just from one life. And I got to see everybody, and they were just so happy. My wife was the first being to greet me, the wife who had passed away. And so that was like the closest person. And from there, it was like all these other people from the current life and other lifetimes of like, good to see you again, right? It's been a couple lifetimes. And then there were some people that I didn't like so much. It really is a lot more casual than I think sometimes we think it would be, because it's home, it's normal. So, and then there were some people that I wouldn't say they were enemies, but we didn't like each other. And there was just this mutual respect of, maybe they had done something bad in a past life to me, or I'd done something bad to them. But it was just this understanding of, I get it. We don't need to like hug and be friends, but thank you. I appreciate you. I respect you. So there was, yeah, 2 different types of reunions, but mostly it was joy and love.
That's a very interesting concept, because I haven't heard that before. And it makes sense that if there was other entities or with souls, let's say, we say people for lack of a better word, but like souls, another soul that you might have wronged in one way, shape, or form. There's no judgment, but there's an energetic thing there that you're just not vibing for whatever reason.
You're
But you are
vibing
at the same time. But you're
deep
yeah.
deep respect and gratitude. Deep. Like,
But it's not. But it's not hug.
impenetrable.
Yes, but
No,
not huggies and kisses.
no, not like, oh my gosh, I love you so much. No, it's like, we did
Thanks
it.
for
Good job.
thanks for murdering me in the Dark Ages. Like none of that.
Thanks for, let's cut that karmic tie. Let's be done with that. We don't have to be friends, but we don't have to be enemies. And there's a lot of gratitude, because whatever we worked out, there are things that we can't work out on any other planet but Earth. There are things that you can't do in the other realms, right? There are higher realms and there are lower realms. Earth, in my experience, is a C average planet. That doesn't mean it's not important. It's very important. But the energy here is very C average. And then you have lower realms, and then we have the higher realms. And people are incarnating from both to
What do you mean
Earth.
by C average? What do you mean C average?
As far as consciousness, it's just a C
Oh,
average planet. As
yeah.
far as the consciousness of the people, the consciousness that it's meant to hold is C average. But we get a lot done here. I think that's how we can be in these bodies and work out a lot of our stuff.
Got it. So there's realms that are not as conscious as we are, and there's other realms. Do you, from your understanding on the other side, are we on a constant upward swing right now as far as consciousness is concerned? Like it seems even in our lifetime,
Yeah.
we've been rising in consciousness from when we were born to where we are. We're not going in a downward spiral. At least I don't think we are. What's your
No, but
feeling
I
on it?
will tell you what's happening as far as my understanding. Yes, we are moving up. We are all one. So we're all moving up together. Higher realm beings have incarnated here. So it's not just that everyone here is average. It's just this planet. There are a lot of like average consciousness beings, sure. But we're all working our way up to oneness reality, back to remembering who we are, right? To come here and play this role and then to go, oh, that's right, I'm not this. I am one with universal consciousness. I am cosmic consciousness. I am love. So coming here, there are beings, because after the astral realm, I incarnated on an even higher realm. It's not where I stayed. I went to a higher realm from there. I went to the causal realm. And then I incarnated into this body. And there are other people doing that. There are other people here who I call them higher realm beings. They've been incarnating on higher realms in this dimension and other dimensions. They're incarnating. And then they came here to help up-level the planet. Then there's also beings who are working their way up. They're not bad. We're all one. They're working their way up from the lower realms. But we're all one. So if we think of it like a body, as a higher realm being, you might say, okay, I'm at the level of my eyes. But a lower realm being might be at the level of my knees or my feet. Well, we want all of it. We're not getting rid of, we're not chopping anything off. We want all of it because we are one. So as the higher realm beings start to shift the planet, even the lower realm beings get pulled up because we're one. The higher realm beings, a lot of times I feel like they're hiding. They're shy. They're not coming and stepping into their full power and potential and their gifts. Well, the lower realm beings are living their best life. They are creating genocide. They are trafficking. They are creating new drugs, street drugs. They are, I don't need to name all of it. We know. They come here and they are fully aligned. They're like, yes, okay, I know who I am unapologetically. I'm going to live my best life, because they're holding that energy from the lower realm, which is their comfort zone. So they're living in alignment with who they truly are as that lower realm being, not who they truly are as the infinite soul, but still, you catch me, right? You understand that. So then there are people out there who are from the higher realms. They've already gone through Earth, they've incarnated on the higher realms, and that's where they're most comfortable. And then they come here and incarnate, and they're playing small, and they're second guessing themselves, and they're having imposter syndromes, and they're not creating podcasts or publishing their book or whatever it is that they know they're meant to do, because they're hiding, because the conversation in this planet is too much about the lower realm stuff. When you look anywhere on the media, it's all about what the lower realm beings are doing. There's not enough media, or there's not enough publicity around what the higher realm beings are doing, around all of the good stuff happening. And so therefore we're focused, hyper focused on the lower realm. And I'm not going to say good or bad, because we're all one. Again, my eyes, my knees, I like them both. Right? So it's not a judgment. It's not an us against them. But it is time for the higher realm beings to wake up and level up and start living the assignment on their soul, because the earth can shift into a higher age, and we are shifting into a higher age. But the question is, if you're here to help shift into a higher age and usher everyone into a higher age, like, are you doing it, or are you hiding? Are you second guessing yourself? And I feel like there's a lot of that happening. I feel like a lot of people are waking up, but they're still moving slower than some of the lower realm beings that are completely living their best life.
Yeah, I've never heard of a bank robber going, I don't know if I really should rob a bank. I don't feel confident enough to rob a bank. You know, like, no, it's like, no, they just robbed the bank. They
Yeah.
don't, there's no blockage whatsoever.
There's no
You know,
blocks. They're not worried about their lower chakras getting cleared before they can go rob a
no,
bank. Whereas higher realm
no.
beings are like, are my chakras clear enough to do this? Right? The lower realm beings are like, yes, this is great. Let's do it. Let's create all this havoc. And then the higher realm beings, like, they're meditating, they're shifting. Okay, great. But like, get into action. You are on earth. You have a physical body. Go do something.
Mm.
Go do the thing that only you can do. Is it hard? Is it uncomfortable? Yeah, but only you can do it. There's not a replacement.
So the life between lives memory, was that before or after the near-death experience?
Before, I was born that way, and I
Oh,
didn't
so
know
you
until I was
knew it.
19. My whole
Oh,
life, and
okay.
that's why the near death was so hard, when they're like, go back and help people, remember who you are. And I was like, you want me to share that story? I mean, can I just stay here? You know, I would rather and so no, I've always known when I was a baby, I would go into the causal, because after the astral realm, there was a celebration, which was really neat. It's kind of like a celebration when you get there, because you're home and you get to have this reunion with your friends and family, even animals. My favorite reunion was actually with a horse who is also a cat. And so one lifetime we were a horse, there it was my horse. Another lifetime it was my cat, and that being was there as well in a human form, and it was just a wonderful reunion. So from there, I had worked on my own consciousness and realized, oh, this is also Leela. This is also a play happening in this realm. People are playing the roles of spiritual beings. People are playing whatever roles, even though we're in our light bodies. I want out of this. So I was able to move into the higher realms of the causal realm. So we had this experience meeting my teacher, my spiritual teacher, my husband, who was going to be like basically planning our lifetime, right? My daughter, and just sort of planning that. And I don't remember the details. There was just love and joy and excitement. And from there, it almost felt like a celebration with so many of the beings in that realm. I got to go into the higher realm and incarnate in the causal realm and have a whole lifetime there. And that's where, again, it was a whole lifetime. So each lifetime, we're in infinite time. So I don't know how long I was there. And that's where they did a life review with me, because I wanted the higher teachings. And I was screaming, I want the higher teachings. And I'm kind of summarizing really quickly. I did write about it in my book, but I'm summarizing really, really quickly. And that's where I had a life review, but from my entire existence incarnate. So from the plant kingdom to the animal kingdom to the human kingdom, I got to see all of my lifetimes and experience all of them. And even on other planets, right? Because we don't only incarnate on Earth. So I got to
Mhm.
see all of that. So all of that is also in my memories when I'm born. And
Wow.
I thought that was normal. I didn't know. Again, it took me until I was 19. And I had some clues that it wasn't normal, but I literally, because I was so young when I got my first clue, I was in preschool, and so for me, when you turn off the lights and it gets dark, I see lights everywhere. It
Mhm.
kind of looks like TV fuzz to me, if you remember TV fuzz.
Mhm.
Just like billions of white lights are everywhere. When I was younger, they were big and there were colorful lights everywhere. And I just thought everyone had that at bedtime, that you turn off the lights and you see all the astral lights.
Mhm.
So at one point, and this is sort of my first clue that people don't remember this, because I thought, wow, they're like, okay, time for bed. And I was like, awesome, like this is gonna be so fun. And I remember feeling or seeing all these lights moving back and forth. And at one point I reached out because I knew I could get one. And so I reached out, and my hand just went through the air. And so I was like, no, this is real. So I reached out again. My hand went through the air. And I reached out again and again. And then I finally reached out and I pulled it back. And I knew it was real. And I woke up and I had this toy in my hand. And it wasn't until I read actually autobiography that I learned about astrally projected objects. So in the morning, I was excited to share. Like, what did you get last night? Right? What did you pull out of the lights? And so I'm sharing this thing I got, and and nobody believes me. And they're like, where did you get that? And I'm like, from the lights. Like, when you turn off the lights and we start to go to bed, all the lights are floating around. It was one of the lights, and I knew I can get it. So I did. I thought they'd be proud of me. And it was like, where did you get that? And I'm like, oh my gosh, they thought I stole it. And I'm in preschool. I'm having this epiphany that I can't talk about this. So then I told myself, it's just taboo. They know it's just taboo to talk about. We're not supposed to talk about this. So again, it wasn't until I was 19 that someone directly told me that people don't remember or talk about these things. So it took a long time.
It seems like it took a long time. Do you remember any other in between lives or even other past lives that have affected the course of this life?
Yeah, I think some of them are fun. So, yeah, I remember being, eating myself to death in one lifetime. I remember being very wealthy, and just very greedy in another lifetime. I remember being in a theater, a performer on a theater on stage in another lifetime. So I remember so many of them. One of my favorites, two of my favorites are actually from the animal kingdom. One was when I was a bird. I think I was a bird of prey because I was up high on this hill, and I was the second to last egg to hatch. And I remember leaving the nest and feeling really nervous, and the other birds had left first. And then I was like, because it's funny, the essence of me was still there, even in the other lifetimes. The essence, not the personality, but the essence of me has always been the same in the insect kingdom and the animal kingdom. It's still me. It's still us. We are the same essence of who you truly are. Even if you're having a lifetime experience as, an insect kingdom or in the animal kingdom. And so I remember flying through this large valley, and almost like GPS would show me that there was a, I don't know, mouse or something, and I would just head toward it without thinking. It was just pure instinct everywhere. And then the life that I remembered the most right before I incarnated as human was as a wolf. And again, it was like this family unit, and I had my job to do, and it was a beautiful lifetime. And then I was human, like living on a farm.
How did you deal with all of this information? I gotta believe this is a lot to process in this little brain of ours. It seems, it's tough enough being a teenager or somebody in your 20s without this information.
Right,
So
right.
how did you process it, deal with it, live a normal life with knowing all this stuff
Well,
about
first, remember,
yourself?
I didn't know. I thought everyone knew too. I thought, because
Right.
how would I know? No one had told me that I couldn't pull an astrally projected object out of the lights. Nobody told me I wasn't allowed to do that. No one told me I wasn't supposed to remember in between lifetimes. I didn't know. So for me, it was normal, but we just don't talk about it, right? That was my thought. And I think that was why I had such a pull to be normal. I just wanted to be normal and fit in. And I think that was how I processed what I was able to do and what I knew and the experiences I had, right? Because I had lots of interesting experiences working in the trauma intensive care unit too. Lots of interesting spiritual experiences with patients, there. But I was trying to do it within a normal setting of a hospital, right? Very normal.
Did you ever have a near-death experience at the hospital when dealing in trauma? Like a patient of yours die and come back and talk about something?
Well, not in the way of going into the higher realms. They would tell us there'd be like a family meeting with a doctor, maybe talking about their condition, maybe taking them off life support, something like that. And they'd go down the hall into one of the double door conference rooms. And, the patient is in the ICU, they're not leaving. And they would tell us about the meetings, the family meetings that they were at. But it was outside down the hall. And that actually happens quite a bit, like more than people even know. I think a lot of patients are having experiences when they code, when they die,
And
or when they're close to death.
did that seem weird to you before you had your
No,
near-death experience? It just seemed normal to you.
I just thought, I live in a world where things that are not normal, I thought were normal. Again, it's like I think that's how I processed it. Oh, we just don't really talk about that, right? And I think, I look at myself and I can kind of laugh, like I was so dense back then. But it's just how I processed it. It was sort of an innocence too. Like, we all remember this, but we're just not talking about it. I didn't know why. And then again, when I was about 19, someone told me. And admittedly, I had a huge crush on this guy that told me, so it sort of hit a little more. So when you're a teenager, all you want to do is fit in. And he was a light
Right.
being. So I think I'm talking to a light being. And I'm talking about, like, remember the place with all the lights before we're born? And I'm talking about, moving into higher realms and how we can travel from that realm into higher realms because we can. And he's just like, he was from California too. And he was like, dude, like, nobody, like, people don't talk about that. And me wanting to be a normal girl was like, okay. So I think the near-death experience was like, stop it, Mariko, wake up. Stop acting
Do you
so
have,
human. That's what I always tell people.
so do you have any advice for people on finding what their true soul plan is, their blueprint, their mission, their soul mission is in life? Because so many of us are trying to figure it out. And you might have an insight that could help somebody listening. So do you have any advice?
I mean, the first thing is, so keep it simple. You guys, I think people are overthinking it. They're over pressuring themselves. Like, take the pressure off. The only thing you're here to do is not a doing, it's a being. The only thing that we're here for is enlightenment, to be a self-realization at the very beginning, right? To realize and remember who you are as the soul, and then move into, oh, I am oneness consciousness. There is no one else. That's the only thing we're here for. That's the experience the universe is having through us, of moving away from itself to come back to itself. And then we complicate it with jobs, and we complicate it with these roles that we want to play because we want to, we do want to do something. And I just said a little while ago, get up and do something. The doing comes out of your soul, right? So the doing comes from our soul of, like, this is what I have to do. Like, for me, I had to create my own modality called Astral therapy. I had to do it. Nobody else was doing it. Of course, I had imposter syndrome. Of course, I thought this is crazy. And yet I had no choice. And I feel like a lot of our soul assignment, when we feel like, what am I here to do? It's the thing that you don't want to. I'll speak for myself. It's the thing I didn't want to do that I resisted the most. It's the story I resisted the most. And it's creating what I was resisting the most because it's bigger than me, because it has nothing to do with me. And I think that when we're looking at what is my soul assignment, first keep it simple. Who are you? And ask yourself, who am I? Who am I? Until your soul answers back. And then mission accomplished. That's what you're here to do. Now, anything that is born from that identity of, this is who I really am, beautiful, share it. Get to work. But you can't really live your soul assignment without feeling and recognizing who you are as a soul. That would be kind of difficult. So the first thing is, take the pressure off,
That's beautiful.
just yeah, be.
Now, Monica, I'm going to ask you a few questions to ask all of my guests. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
I think what I just said, realizing and remembering who you are. That's all we're here to do. That's it. You start to have that, no one can take it away from you.
If you had a chance to go back in time and talk to little Monica, what advice would you give her?
Oh my gosh. Well, that's something that can happen, actually. I got stories. Don't worry. It really is like, just do it. Don't worry. I believe in you. And feeling that my future self believe in me got me where I am.
How do you define God?
Oneness. Oneness consciousness. It's ever expanding oneness consciousness.
And what is love?
You and me. It's our true identity. It's the ultimate reality with no opposite.
And what is the ultimate purpose of life?
To remember who you are.
And where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing in the world?
I have a website, soulpriority.com, and I've got a Facebook page, Instagram at Mariko Frederick, and a YouTube page as well at Mariko Frederick. So they can find me on social media or my website.
And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
Get to work. I think a lot of people listening are higher realm beings. You've been incarnating on the higher realm. You know who you are. Quit playing small, get off the sidelines and start elevating humanity. Do what you know your soul is being called to do.
Mariko, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story with all of us. And I hope this helps awaken some of these higher beings into action, because God knows we need it. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you, my dear.
Thank you for having me. This was fun. Thank you.